What's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Today is June 7th, 2026, about 10:30 p.m. where I'm at right now. And we are continuing our 22nd book in our Book to React series where we read an entire text cover to cover on live with the people. This is an open source library, a community book club, and a place of education, not only for myself, but for y'all as well. I'm here to learn and grow with the people. Shout out to my guy Kamal up in the live stream. Shout out to everybody else tuning into the live stream right now. It's been a few days, actually, since I've been on live, about a day and a half. I just got caught up with friends. You know, I have a social life. You know, I got to go outside and touch grass every now and then. So I'm not always able to come on live and be with the people exactly when I need to be or when I schedule it to be. Things come up and, you know, in life, you got to have fun sometimes. So sorry for anybody that's been waiting for this to come on live or anybody who has been anticipating this. I am looking forward to reading Leon Trotsky's The History of the Russian Revolution. We are on chapter 22, which will be the final chapter of volume 1. We still have 2 more volumes to go. We are around the 400-page mark. We've been putting in a lot of work to read this text. It's the longest book that we probably will ever read for the Book to React series because I find it hard to imagine there are any other books that are over 1,000 pages that I will find very interesting. Though there is a Che Guevara book that I will tackle. I have to do that for Book React very soon. But other than that, this Leon Trotsky book is a monster, but you know, the journey of 1,000 kilometers begins with the first step, right? And so far we've made considerable progress to where we are about 33% done with this book already. So I'm looking forward to having any more challenges, more information from this text my way. Shout out to everybody up in the live stream. Once again, shout out to Kamal. We have both live streams going. I have the horizontal and the vertical live stream going simultaneously. Looking forward to reading what you people are going to be saying to me. Make sure that you're in alignment, because if you're not, you will be sent to the re-education camp or the gulag very easily. So behave yourself in the comment section. Without further ado, let's jump into chapter 22, the Congress of Soviets and the June demonstration. The first Congress of the Soviets, which sanctioned the offensive for Kerensky, assembled in Petrograd on June 3rd in the building of the Cadet Corps. There were 820 delegates with a vote and 268 with a voice. They represented 305 local Soviets, 53 district and regional organizations at the front, the rear institutions of the army, and a few peasant organizations. The right to vote was accorded to Soviets containing not less than 25,000 men. Soviets containing from 10,000 to 25,000 had a voice. On the basis of this rule, by the way, none too strictly observed, we may assume that over 20 million people stood behind the Soviets. Out of 777 delegates giving information as to their party allegiance, 285 were social revolutionaries, 248 Mensheviks, 105 Bolsheviks. A few belonged to less important groups. The left wing, the Bolsheviks and the internationalists adhering to them, constituted less than a fifth of the delegates. The Congress consisted for the most part of people who had registered as socialists in March but got tired of the revolution by June. Petrograd must have seemed to them a town gone mad. Shout out to Kirkham Down Stalin. He is up in the vertical live stream telling you to behave yourselves. So any anti-blackness, any homophobia, any anti-communist rhetoric, any just piping off the side of your neck will quickly get you sent to the re-education camp or the gulag. Salute, Commissar, Comrade, Kirkham Down Stalin. Now, back to the text. Very interesting that Trotsky uses the word men here. 25,000 men from the Soviets had to be counted and registered. I wonder if the Soviets were doing gender discrimination, as in at this time only the men could be in the Soviets, which could have been understandable to some degree because of the rampant sexism that existed in the past. Though I do think Trotsky was ahead of the curve when it comes to feminism, because he makes it explicitly clear that the Russian Revolution, the February Revolution, which was the rehearsal for the October Revolution, was led by women, was started by women. But I digress. Let's continue here. The Congress began by ratifying the banishment of Grimm, an unhappy Swiss socialist who had been trying to save the Russian Revolution and the German social democracy by means of backstage negotiations with the Hohenzollern diplomats. The demand of the left wing that they take up immediately the question of the coming offensive was rejected by an overwhelming majority. The Bolsheviks looked like a tiny group, but on that very day, but on that very day, and perhaps hour, a conference of the factory and shop committees of Petrograd adopted, also with an overwhelming majority, a resolution that only a government of Soviets could save the country. The compromisers, no matter how nearsighted they were, could not help seeing what was happening around them every day. In the session of June 4th, the Bolshevik hater, Lieber, under the influence of the provincials, denounced the good-for-nothing commissars for the government to whom the power had not been surrendered in the provinces. A whole series of functions of the governmental organs have, as a result, gone over into the hands of the Soviets, even when the Soviet did not want them. Those people had to complain to somebody, even against themselves. Shout out to Kirkham Down Stalin. He says, it would be dope to see you read some Frantz Fanon, Gerald Horne, or even Harry Haywood. I did read Harry Haywood. We read Harry Haywood's autobiography, Black Bolshevik. We read that last summer, hot summer here in Budapest. I was sweating like a motherfucker running through that long book. That was the longest book we had read up to this point. Gerald Horne, I would love to read Gerald Horne's The Counter-Revolution of 1776, and also there's a book he wrote about the Communist Party in the 1940s, I think. So yeah, I would love to read Gerald Horne's work. And as far as Frantz Fanon, that is one of those things I am embarrassed to say. I am embarrassed to tell people I have not read any Frantz Fanon, though I'm pretty sure all of Frantz Fanon's work has bled into the work of the intellectuals that I have read before and after, such as Malcolm X and other people. Huey P. Newton, you know what I'm saying? We read Huey P. Newton's book a few months ago, and he was a reader of Frantz Fanon. So yeah, there are many, many books that I am ashamed to say. I have literal embarrassment saying that I have not read them yet. But Fanon and Gerald Horne definitely are on the upcoming reading list and reaction list. So one more comment from Kirkham Down Stalin. He says, it's a must to read his stuff, but for sure, don't feel too bad. Fanon's life was also great. Absolutely. I mean, Fanon is probably all of our intellectual grandfathers. You know what I'm saying? If you're a post-colonial thinker, if you're a, Afro-pessimist, if you're anywhere involved in the black radical tradition or a black leftist of any sort, I would even argue the liberals are included in that. Fanon is our intellectual grandfather. He is where all of this sort of stems from. So there's a lot of love and praise I have for Fanon, even if I haven't read any Fanon yet, though I will. You know what I'm saying? I'm doing a lot of catching up reading with the Book to React series as well. But I will continue here. One of the delegates, a school teacher, complained to the Congress that after 4 months of revolution, there had not been the slightest change in the sphere of education. All of the old teachers, inspectors, directors, overseers of districts, many of them former members of the Black Hundreds, all of the old school programs, reactionary textbooks, even the old assistant ministers remained peacefully at their post. Only the Tsar's portrait had been removed to the attics, and these might any day be struck back in their places. The Congress could not make up its mind to lift a hand against the State Duma or against the State Council. Its timidity before the reaction was covered up by the Menshevik orator Bogdanov with the remark that the Duma and the Soviet are dead and non-existent organizations anyway. Martov, with his polemical wit, answered, Bogdanov proposes that we should declare the Duma dead but not make any attempt upon its life. Shout out to everybody up in the live stream. Up in here, we have Forced to be Atheist. He says, Shalom. Salam alaikum to you. Wisdom is Mine says, Moses is not a Hebrew name, but an Egyptian name. Alex Demond says, this deserves millions of views. I appreciate that, Alex Demond. And Kirkham Down Silence says, wow, this stuff is such a timely read. Absolutely. Because, every time a revolution happens or anytime there's revolutionary activity, people expect shit to just change overnight. For example, and this is a bad example, but let's just talk about Zoran, right? There are some people already critical of Zoran, the mayor of New York City, because the public grocery stores haven't opened yet, or pre-K is still expensive, or the rent is still too damn high, all etc., right? And so because revolutions take time, some people want to fall back into reactions. They still want to bring out the old textbooks, the old ways of thinking, and put the old leaders back on the wall. When revolution is a process, it is a consistent process. Okay? I will continue here. The Congress, in spite of its solid government majority, proceeded in an atmosphere of alarm and uncertainty. Patriotism had grown rather damp and gave out only lazy flashes. It was obvious that the masses were dissatisfied, and the Bolsheviks were immeasurably stronger throughout the country, and especially in the capital, than at the Congress. Reduced to its elements, the quarrel between the Bolsheviks and the compromisers invariably revolved around the question: with whom shall the Democrats side, the imperialists or the workers? The shadow of the Entente stood over the Congress. The question of the offensive was predetermined. The Democrats had nothing to do but accede. All right? Shout out to Acti up in the chat. She says, hey, comrades, look at Acti pretending to be a red. I know Acti's she's faking the funk. We all know Acti is a liberal. Let's let Acti be a liberal. Okay, everybody reply, hey, liberal Acti. Acti is also a top commissar too, and she will send your ass to the gulag if you are talking a bunch of mess. Okay, so no racism, no anti-blackness. Acti says, wow, I'm leaving. Don't leave. Don't leave me, please. Don't leave me, Acti, please. Don't leave, Acti. Don't leave. Anyway, go into the comments. War is Peace. It says, a good book to read, The History of the Central Banking and the Enslavement of Mankind by Stephen Mitford Goodson. That would also be very good to tackle that from a Marxist, communist, left-wing perspective as well, because our financial system is predicated upon us being slaves to capital. Absolutely. So I will continue here. At this critical moment, preached Setsorelli, not one social force ought to be thrown out of the scales, so long as it may be useful to the cause of the people. Such was the justification for a coalition with the bourgeoisie. Seeing that the proletariat, the army, and the peasantry were upsetting their plans at every step, the Democrats had to open a war against the people under guise of a war against the Bolsheviks. Thus, Setsorelli had declared that Kronstadt sailors apostates in order not to throw out of his scales the cadet Pepelayev. The coalition was ratified by a majority of 543 votes against 126, with 52 abstaining. I want to ask everybody here. The Bolsheviks were never afraid to be the minority. How do you feel about being the minority and going against the grain? If you're here on this live stream, most likely you rock with me because of the type of stuff I talk about, which tends to be a bit against the counterculture, the hegemony we live under, right? But how do you feel about being a minority? And do you think a minority is capable of making a grand change? I would argue yes. And I would also say that, history has proven that a minority can make incredible changes to a society, to an entire world. You don't need the majority on your side to make change. But how do you feel about being a minority? All right. So Kirkham Down Stalin has his first prisoner. I don't know where he sent him, to the gulag, or if he sent him to the re-education camp. Oh, it looks like he went to the re-education camp because it says he was timed out. He was timed out for an ungodly number of seconds. So shout out to Kirkham Down Stalin with that AK-47 strapped around his shoulder, ready to march you motherfuckers to your impending doom. Anyway, answer my question, y'all. How do y'all feel about being a minority? Do you feel like being a minority gives us a certain power, or does it hinder us in being able to change this society? I will continue here. The work of this enormous and flabby assembly in the Cadet Corps was distinguished by grandeur in the matter of declarations and conservative stinginess in practical tasks. This laid on all its decisions a stamp of hopelessness and hypocrisy. The Congress recognized the rights of all Russian nationalities to self-determination, but gave the key to this problematic right not to the oppressed nations themselves, but to a future constituent assembly, in which the compromisers hoped to be in a majority and capitulate before the imperialists, exactly as they had done in the government. Kirkland Stalin answering the question as to what does it feel like to be a minority. I think it's somewhat a power, but the majority agrees with us. They just aren't fully aware. That's very powerful. That's very powerful as well. I definitely think most Americans would like universal health care, would like a guaranteed housing program, would like a guaranteed jobs program, would like knowing that their children are going to be safe, and also as they enter into old age, that they can have a bountiful retirement. Most people agree with those things. Those are basic things all Americans tend to agree with. It's just been co-opted by the right wing to tell them the way you're going to be able to live in retirement and forever is put all your money in a 401k and let's cross our fingers and hope the stock market goes up. The way your children are going to be safe is if everybody in society has a gun. The only way, we're all going to get universal health care coverage is if private insurers enter the market and compete for the best price. Well, whoops, looks like they're forming a cartel and they're raising the prices or maintaining certain prices. So yeah, a lot of people have been deluded into actually thinking that right-wing policies are the answers to their solutions, which they are not. I will continue here. Acti says, I won't mind being a minority group as long as things are equal and fair. Most of the time it isn't fair. It does provide a tighter community, so that's the advantage of it is as well. Very good point, Acti. Because you are a minority, that also means there's more close-knitness within the community. I'm a Muslim, and I love being a Muslim more, actually, to keep it real, in America. I love being a Muslim more when I'm in Serbia, when I'm in Hungary, when I'm as a small group of people who all go to the mosque and we all get to know each other by name. Plus, on top of that, when you're in masjids in Muslim majority countries, number one, you don't know, who you're praying with exactly. But you're also not in as a diverse of a community. But when you're in a minority group, and I'm talking about an ideological minority group or an interest minority group, not really like a racial or ethnic minority group. But I was talking about, when you're in that tight-knit community, it does create closer bonds. It does diversify it too, because the people that are a part of it tend to be more true believers. You know what I'm saying? Especially when that social pressure isn't on them to conform to a certain way. But I digress. Let me know what you think. Continuing here. All right. The Congress refused to pass a decree on the 8-hour day. Satsarelli explained this sidestepping by the difficulty of reconciling the interest of the different layers of the population, as though any single great deed in history was ever accomplished by reconciling interest, and not by the victory of progressive interest over reactionary. Grothman, a Soviet economist, introduced toward the end of the Congress his inevitable resolution as to the oncoming economic catastrophe and the necessity of governmental regulation. The Congress adopted this ritual resolution, but only so far that everything might remain as before. So, what I think Trotsky will eventually underline or illustrate through this example of this assembly coming together to decide on the future of Russia is that liberal democracy doesn't work. Multi-party liberal democracy where people are sectioned off into groups and forming strict ideological lines and boundaries on what people can think and believe does not work. But I would like to ask all of you, since we have an engaged audience, an intellectual audience here, I want to ask you, do you think if we are successful in forming these socialist states of the Western world, particularly in America, but let's say any Western developed modern capitalist country, should we have a multi-party system? If we are able to create the Soviet states of America, should we still allow the Republicans to be running around? Should we still allow the Democrats to be running around? Should we still allow any of these parties to still exist, even if we have hegemony and dominance? Should we? I would like to know. I would argue no. I would argue no. A one-party state that is successful, a one-party state that is able to provide for the people is much better than a multi-party state where the people are getting shot in the street and ending up with $50,000 medical bills. But I would like to know what you think. Do you think we should still allow multi-parties if we create the Soviet states of America or the Soviet states of France, et cetera, et cetera? I will continue here. Having deported Grimm, wrote Trotsky on the 7th of June, the Congress returned to the order of the day. But capitalistic profits remain, as before, inviolable for Skobelev and his colleagues. The food crisis is getting sharper every hour. In the diplomatic sphere, the government is taking blow after blow. And finally, this is so hysterically proclaimed offensive is obviously getting ready to come down on the nation, a monstrous adventure. We should be willing to watch peacefully the sanctified activities of the ministers, Livov, Shesherenko, Setsorelli, for a number of months. We need time for our own preparations, but the underground mole digs too fast. With the help of these socialist ministers, the problem of power may rise before the members of this Congress a great deal sooner than any of us imagine. Go into the comments. Kirkham Down Stalin says, I like how Korea does their party system because they allow opposition parties, but they definitely not given a lot of power. Ontologically Shook says, kind of like what we used to have in the past before our history was erased and the infrastructure was melted all over the world. And Ontologically Shook says, you can see how great cultures were destroyed and turned into third world places. It was systematic. Now we are all slaves. I guess he is referring back to the book, and Ontologically Shook is too stupid. He is too fucking stupid to actually pay attention to what we are talking about here, because I asked a question to the audience. So I'll probably ignore Ontologically Shook. Acti says, I'd argue yes, because if the communist state is doing its job well, people will most likely choose them either way. Why be scared of competition if you know you're good? That's kind of logical, Acti, but I would argue, we could argue, let's say I turn on my liberal mind. We could say that the Democrats, we could arguably say under the Bill Clinton administration, et cetera, right? Bill Clinton's administration, by all means, was a domestic success, right? The GDP was rising. There were so many other things that happened. Crime went down, things like that. What else? Shit. Okay, it's very hard for me to put on my liberal mind. I'm trying to think of some success that the Democrats had. And it's impossible. I literally cannot even think of positive things. I was struggling. My brain is struggling trying to think of anything positive from Bill Clinton's administration because, shit, I'm just thinking of the war on drugs, mass incarceration, shit like that. Oh, man, I can't. Oh, man, NAFTA, shit, I can't even think of anything. But I would argue that Democratic policies, let's just say this is provably true. The stock market and the economy in America does better under Democrats. America is a capitalistic society, and everybody loves money. And everybody loves when the stock market go up. When stocks go up, everybody happy, right? And the economy is happy, and everybody's like that. But still, Democrats keep getting voted out of power. And people, instead of saying, we want the GDP to rise, we want the economy to do better, we want the stock market to go like this, people say, you know what I want? A stupid-ass Republican that's going to sink the GDP, rise up the debt, send bombs and missiles to Israel for billions of dollars, and bomb children in Iran, costing the American taxpayer billions of dollars. And what we're going to do to pay for it all is to cut public services. That's, I mean, think about that. People vote against that all the time, okay? People vote against that all the time. So I'm confused. I'm confused how, we can say, well, if we just do a good job, people will like us. People don't like the Democrats just basically, even though they are better for the economy. And that's the number one thing Republicans and stupid MAGA folks say is better, right? So, yeah. Anyway, Aki says, still no free healthcare and education, though, LOL. Yeah, no, none of that was under Clinton. Kirkham Down Silence says, recognizing that some things are just incorrect thoughts is also something I believe in, like being pro-war. Some political ideas are criminal. Yeah, like Nazism. We should lock up all the Nazis. Total Nazi death. I'm against the death penalty, but if you're a Nazi, people should kill you. Yes, so I agree with that. Stewart said, how many billions did Biden and the Dems send to Ukraine? Too much and too many. He sent too many weapons and too much money to Ukraine. All right? I know Kirkham Down Stalin deleted your message, but if somebody is critical of the Democrats while also being critical of Republicans, I will allow their commentary to exist. But I don't want anybody coming up here just doing, one-sided partisan politicking in this live stream. This is a leftist live stream where we are critical of the liberal, I would argue illiberal, established order. Okay? Criticism is on the American government, period. The most wicked, evil government to ever exist on the planet. Criticism is on both sides of the aisle because both sides are wicked warmongers, okay? Kirkham Down Stalin says, I feel that, but it's so off topic. I do agree, though, because that's just a right-winger. Stewart 2004 is probably a stupid right-winger. Okay, we all hate Biden. Let's all say we are not Democrats here. We are not Democrats. I know I'm wearing a sexy blue suit, but I am far from a Lib Dem, okay? So, Stewart 2004 says, I'm a hypocrite. Oh, Stewart, you might get killed in here, boy. Stewart, you might get killed in here. Oh, my God. Oh, and you got two of my commissars on your ass? Oh, my God. You might. Oh, my God. Stewart, it's not going to look good for you, man. It's not going to look good for you. All right. So, Acti says, I feel like it's mostly like that in Switzerland. Okay. Acti says, maybe I'm not that familiar, though. All right. What's most like it in Switzerland? Like a good social safety net? Okay. Okay. Anyway, let's continue here. Trotsky says, trying to shield themselves from the masses with a higher authority. The leaders dragged the Congress into all current conflicts, pitilessly compromising it in the eyes of the Petrograd workers and soldiers. The most resounding episode of this kind was the incident about the summer home of Durnovo, an old czarist bureaucrat who had made himself famous as Minister of the Interior by putting down the revolution of 1905. The vacant home of this hated and moreover dirty-handed bureaucrat was seized by workers' organizations on the Viborg side, chiefly because of the enormous gardens which became a favorite playground for children. The bourgeois press represented the place as a lair of pogromists and hold-up men, the Kronstadt of the Viborg district. No one took the trouble to find out what the facts were. The government, carefully avoiding all important questions, undertook with fresh passion to rescue this house. They demanded sanction for the heroic undertaking from the executive committee, and Setzarelli, of course, did not refuse. The procurer gave an order to evict the group of anarchists from the place in 24 hours. Learning from the military activities and preparation, the workers sounded the alarm. The anarchists, on their side, threatened armed resistance. 28 factories proclaimed a protest strike. The executive committee issued a proclamation accusing the Viborg workers of aiding the counter-revolution. After all these preliminaries, a representative of justice and the militia penetrated into the lion's den. They found complete order reigning. The house was occupied by a number of workers, educational organizations. They were compelled to withdraw in shame. This history had, however, a further development. Very interesting. So once again, Trotsky is laying out how the people were seizing the means of production in their society and also the private property of their overlords, of their oppressors, right? He spoke about this in a previous chapter, and also he is talking about how these workers basically took over the house of this guy who brutally repressed the 1905 Russian Revolution. And I want to ask everybody this. Since we have a lively, engaging, educated audience here, what do you think about possibly seizing property, starting autonomous zones as a way or a strategy of bringing about the type of society we want to see. For example, I believe in Seattle, they had the CHAZ, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, where basically people said, you know, we don't need the police here, we don't need the government, we're going to create our own government here. Or people running up in houses, like, for example, where I'm from, in Louisiana, we still have slave plantations, operational and inoperational. We have slave plantations in Louisiana. Angola, Louisiana, is a large open slave plantation. It was a slave plantation back in the 1900s, and it's a slave plantation in 2026 right now, and it will continue to be. It will probably continue to be as long as these crack-ass crackers in Louisiana remain in power, where every day black men get up, walk out into a field before sunrise, and pick tomatoes and potatoes with white men with shotguns on horseback. An open slave plantation in Louisiana. We also have slave plantations where people are doing weddings, where white people get all their other cracker friends to come on down to Louisiana and have a wedding at a slave plantation. And the people are sleeping in the guest houses, which were these slave quarters. Absolutely sick. If we are serious about combating racism and actually seizing the means of production, why don't we just take over these slave plantations? Why don't we all run up in Angola? Why don't we all just run up in these slave homes that they still have in Louisiana and say, we are not leaving until this place is turned into an educational facility, or until this place is turned into a community center, or a school, or a hospital, or totally evaporated and turned into a memorial to the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people here that worked here until they died with no pay. What do you think about that strategy? What do you think about that? Because it's not impossible. The Black Liberation Army broke people out of jail. I know we like to think that America's carceral state is so impenetrable because we have supermax facilities like in Colorado, but we could take those bitches. We could run up in them federal penitentiaries. We could take over state jails. We could do it. The people's power is real. If they could break Assata out, we can do much more. Facts. But I would like to know what y'all think. Should we run up in houses and start autonomous zones? What do you think about that? Anyway, go into the comments. Kirkham Down Silent says, we talking about the Russian Revolution, Democrats, but this is like 1920. Actually 1917 to be exact. Stewart 2004 says, I don't know much about Russian Revolution. I know things about World War II and communism. Okay. Kirkland Down Stalin says, they're taking back the lands that they've worked on. And Stewart 2004 says, Mamdani is seizing property in New York. Okay. Stewart 2004 is pretty damn dumb. He might be born in 2004, which is crazy. I got my first piece of pussy in 2004. And this man just barely came out the nutsack. Jesus Christ, it's crazy, man. Gen Z, man, y'all are cooked. All right? So, Stewart 2004 says, his 2026 criminals belong in prison. What happened 100 years ago is irrelevant. I didn't say that we don't need prisons. I am not a prison abolitionist, and I agree with you, criminals belong in prison. Let's start with Donald Trump. Let's arrest Donald Trump. Let's make a citizen's arrest on Donald Trump and throw him in prison. Because Stewart 2004, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't be happy about Donald Trump if he raped your mama. If he ran up in your mama and forced his 2 fingers up her like he did to E. Jean Carroll. Would you like that, Stewart 2004? Donald Trump ran up on your mama and forced his 2 fingers up inside that nasty cunt? Would you like that? Would you like that? Would you like that? Anyway, Kirkham Down Silent says, it depends on if the criminals were rightfully arrested. Once again, I am not a prison abolitionist. Prison abolition is just reformism, unless we're talking about abolishing capitalism and overturning this wicked system, okay? So, yeah, I will continue here. On the 9th of June, a bomb was exploded at the Congress. In the morning's edition of Pravda appeared an appeal for a demonstration on the following day. Chedsey, who knew how to get scared and was therefore inclined to scare others, announced in a voice from the tomb, if measures are not taken by the Congress, tomorrow will be fatal. The delegates lifted their heads in alarm. The idea of a showdown between the Petrograd workers and soldiers and the Congress was suggested by the whole situation. The masses were urging on the Bolsheviks. The garrison especially was seething, fearing that in connection with the offensive, they would be distributed among the regiments and scattered along the front. To this was united a bitter dissatisfaction with the Declaration of the Rights of the Soldier, which had been a big backward step in comparison with Order Number 1, and with the regime actually established in the army. The initiative for the demonstration came from the military organization of the Bolsheviks. Its leaders asserted, and quite rightfully as events showed, that if the party did not take the leadership upon itself, the soldiers themselves would go into the streets. The sharp turn in the mood of the masses, however, could not be easily apprehended, and hence there was a certain vacillation in the ranks of the Bolsheviks themselves. Volodarsky was not sure that the workers would come out on the street. There was fear, too, as to the possible character of the demonstration. Representatives of the military organization declared that the soldiers, fearing attacks and reprisals, would not go out without weapons. What will come out of the demonstration? Asked the prudent Trotsky, and demanded supplementary deliberations. Stalin thought that the fermentation among the soldiers is a fact. Among the workers, there is no such definite mood, but nevertheless judged it necessary to show resistance to the government. Kalinin, always more inclined to avoid than welcome a battle, spoke emphatically against the demonstration, referring to the absence of any clear motive, especially among the workers. The demonstration will be purely artificial. On June 8th, at a conference with the representatives of the workers' sections, after a series of preliminary votes, 131 hands against 6 were finally raised for the demonstration, with 22 abstaining. Go into the comment sections. Acti says, about the taking of property. Oh, Acti's a theorist now. She's starting her comments with, on the taking of property by Akdenis Shaheen Hill. Okay, I can't wait to read Acti's theorist text. I can't wait. Anyway, on taking property, says Acti, is connected to another topic that you talked about. I think we need government officials to join the fight for that kind of revolution, like the police, etc., should join. I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. For our revolution to be successful, yes, we will have to co-opt the police. We will have to recruit police officers. Acti saying stop. I'm telling you, Acti, you have an intellectual mind, so I respect your mind. I'm just saying it's very funny how you started the comment with, on the taking of property. I can't wait to read that hardcover book and blow the dust off it. Anyway, going to the other comments here. Yes, Kirkham Down Stalin says, nobody in the Epstein files is in prison. Facts, except Ghislaine. And I promise you, I will laugh. I will laugh so hard when MAGA sees the day Trump either croaks over or leaves office in a temper tantrum because he didn't win his illegal third term. I promise you, I will laugh so hard when Donald Trump pardons Ghislaine Maxwell. I promise you this will happen. I don't have a crystal ball, but I do know the future. It's so obvious. Trump wants to let the most prolific accomplice to a serial sex offender and child rapist, Ghislaine Maxwell, walk. And I promise you that will happen. I promise you. I would put $100, $1,000. I would clear out my bank account to bet anybody that. I bet you Trump will pardon Ghislaine. Facts. Facts. She's been treated very wrong. That what they did to Ghislaine is very wrong. He's going to let that bitch walk free. Because who else is going to supply him his undesirable need to molest children and rape women? Who else is going to do it except Ghislaine? Who else? Who else? Anyway, going to the comments here. Kirkham Down Stalin, in reply by Stewart 2004, says, nobody was ever charged with insurrection after the January 6th insurrection. Yes, you know what they were charged with? Child pornography. Many of the people that Trump pardoned after letting them out of jail then got caught up with child pornography. These sick MAGA bastards. Sick MAGA bastards. All y'all want to do is rape children and break the law and possibly do it with impunity. Sick bastards. Sick bastards. I'm telling y'all, man. Anyway, The work of preparation was carried on up to the last moment secretly, in order not to permit the social revolutionaries and Mensheviks to start a counter-agitation. That legitimate measure of caution was afterward interpreted as evidence of a military conspiracy. The Central Council of Factory and Shop Committees joined in the decision to organize the demonstration. Upon the insistence of Trotsky and against the objection of Lunacharsky, writes Yugov, the committee of the Mensheviks decided to join the demonstration. Preparations were carried on with boiling energy. The manifestation was to raise the banner of power to the Soviets. The fighting slogan ran, "Down with the 10-minister capitalist." That was the simplest possible expression for a breakup of the coalition with the bourgeoisie. The procession was to march to the Cadet Corps where the Congress was sitting. This was to emphasize that the question was not of overthrowing the government, but of bringing pressure on the Soviet leaders. Absolutely fantastic. So I know I've been chatting with all of you very quickly, but let's give a brief synopsis of everything that's happening. The bourgeoisie, the Soviets, the Bolsheviks, the Social Revolutionaries, the Mensheviks, the old people from the old guard are all coming together in a coalition to try to form a new government from Russia. At the same time, there's a parallel government running, which are the workers' Soviets, the workers' councils that have popped up everywhere all over Russia. Not all of them are fully revolutionary to where they want to overturn the capitalist system, but a lot of them are. So the Bolsheviks are saying that, they have about 20 million people on their side, and the rest of the country, and Russia was the biggest country at this time, about 100,000 or so. 100 million or so other people, believing other different things, right? So, the workers are starting to get tired with this facilitating with the bourgeoisie. You know what I'm saying? So now they're at this point where they're just saying, listen, we're done taking this Congress that y'all are putting together seriously. Real power is with us anyway. So why are we even entertaining you? So now the workers did a vote because democracy does exist under socialism, and the workers all voted, even against leaders like Trotsky, that they are going to go out and demonstrate and say, we don't want this government anymore. We are the government, for real. Anyway, Kirkendall Stalin got sent to the Gulag, I guess, or to the re-education camp. I don't know for how long, but sorry, boss. I don't know what you said, but the commissar is always right. I'm sorry. The commissar Kirkendall Stalin is always right. I'm never going to argue with him. He has good judgment. He has good judgment. So whatever you said, if it got triggered, boy, you better study hard in the re-education camp. You better take up them little red books and start memorizing some Mao. Anyway, man, I would like to know what y'all think about this. Since I have an educated, enlightened audience here, what do you think, once again, just about starting parallel governments? Parallel governments, like, they say, for example, the government of Taiwan is the real Chinese government. They pretend to be real China. They believe they're the continuation of the China that was before Mao and all the Reds took over mainland China, right? So there are some people that still believe Taiwan has authority when speaking for China, right? And the billions of Chinese people that, live there, right? What do you think about that? Could we start a parallel government to counteract this liberal hegemony, this bourgeois dictatorship that we live under? Could we create a parallel government where we elect our own representatives, have our own councils, our own laws, et cetera, et cetera? I know that's verging on the territory of like sovereign citizenship, and I also believe that should work in parallel with our other revolutionary actions to overturn this evil, capitalistic, racist, white supremacist system. But what do you think? Could we form a successful parallel government? Anyway, Kirkendall Stalin says, it just felt like the brother wasn't talking about anything relevant, but he's funny. Okay. As you wish, man. I don't judge. I don't judge. You have full power and you have my full authority. In the Simon Soviet, in the People's Soviet of the Simon Republic, the People's Republic of Simon Stan, you have all the power, boss. I'm not judging you, man. Kirkham Down Silent says a parallel government is a start, but once we have the majority of people on board. Well, I mean, the Bolsheviks never had the majority of people on board. They had a large section. So I do think, we would, in America, in the American context, we would need to have at least 20 million Americans on our side to start our parallel government, at least, to give it legitimacy. But once again, what this book is teaching us is that we don't need the majority of people to agree with us. Just like the majority of people right now don't agree with the American government sending billions of dollars and weapons and bombs to Israel. Most Americans don't like that, but yet and still our government does it. You know what I mean? Anyway, I digress. Kirkham Down Stalin says, right, a large enough section having a lot of the military or something. Yeah. We need paramilitary, the military, some police, a lot of the workers, and all the bad bitches. We need all the bad bitches also in the Simon Soviet parallel government republic. All the bad BBL baddies come on this side. You know what I'm saying? Because we'll seize the means of production of OnlyFans for you bad BBL baddies to come over here, twerk it, pop it, and you'll get all the profits in a profit share. Just make me your king. Just please make me your king, BBL baddies, please. Okay, continuing here. To be sure, other ideas were expressed at the preliminary conference of the Bolsheviks. For instance, Smilga, then a young member of the Central Committee, proposed that they should not hesitate to seize the post office, telegraph, and arsenal if events developed to the point of a clash. Another participant in the conference, a member of the Petrograd Committee, Latsis, comments in his diary upon the rejection of Smilga's proposal, I cannot reconcile myself. I arranged with comrades Samashko and Rakia to be fully armed in case of necessity and seize the railroad terminals, arsenals, banks, post, and telegraph offices with the help of a machine gun regiment. Samashko was the officer of a machine gun regiment. Rakia, a worker, one of the militant Bolsheviks. Shout out to my guy Nelson Moreno up in the live stream, top comrade as well. He says institutions are usually a lot slower than the public. Absolutely. And we need to be aware of that as well, because a lot of our institutions don't immediately respond to the people's needs. That's a very good point. Because Trotsky even says here, the Bolsheviks disagreed with a lot of the things that the people wanted to do. The people will always be ahead of what the leadership or the left-wing intelligentsia thinks. You know what I mean? Because the people know exactly what they want. Who knows better about, food supply? Or who knows better about rent stabilization? The person who owns their own property and has a full fridge, or the person living in a rent-controlled apartment with an empty fridge? You know what I'm saying? Acti says, most Americans can't find the parallel country on the map. You like BBLs now? I was joking, Acti. A lot of the times I like to be tongue-in-cheek. I want to put my tongue in your cheeks, but you're not here. But, I like to be joking sometimes, to show that, communists have the best sex, and we also have some of the best jokes. I know a lot of my jokes fail a lot of the time. And as much as I would like to, I don't think I would be successful in stand-up. But I was just making an observation that sex workers under communism will have a better economic outcome. Right now, the sex work industry is very exploitative. As we know, OnlyFans, or not as I know, because I only look at OnlyFans for research purposes, a lot of the sex workers that make the billions or millions of dollars from their work are just 1%. And a lot of other girls are just on the platform showing ass and titties and making nothing. You know what I'm saying? And that's not right. That's not right. If you're willing to pop it with the camera on a tripod, you should get all the money in the world. You know what I mean? Kirkham Down Silent says, tongue-in-cheek. Kirkham Down Silent, that comment was not for you. There was no reason to comment that, my guy. Kirkham Down, there was no reason for you to repeat, I want to put my tongue in your cheeks. I was talking to my wife. Come on now, man. Come on now. Now, every time I do put my tongue in her cheeks, I'm going to be like Kirkham Down Stalin knows what I'll be up to. He knows what I'll be up to, man. Oh, man. Anyway, continuing here. The existence of such moods is easily understandable. The whole course of the party was toward a seizure of power, and the question was merely of appraising the present situation. An obvious break in favor of the Bolsheviks was taking place in Petrograd, but in the provinces the same process was going slower. Moreover, the front needed the lessons of an advance before it could shake off its distrust of the Bolsheviks. Lenin, therefore, stood firm on his April position. Patiently explain. Sukhanov, in his notes, describes the plan of the demonstration of June 10th as a direct device of Lenin for seizing the power. If the situation proves favorable, as a matter of fact, only individual Bolsheviks tried to put the matter this way, aiming, according to the ironic expression of Lenin, just a wee bit too far to the left. Strangely enough, Sukhanov does not even try to compare his arbitrary guesses with the political line of Lenin expressed in innumerable speeches and articles. So yeah, the Bolsheviks, the communists in Russia at this time, were still, not widely known. They were, considered very radical. And what did Lenin say? What did Lenin tell us? What are we supposed to do with this problem when people don't understand socialist ideas, socialist tendencies, or a socialist vision? Lenin told us in two words, patiently explain. Patiently explain. Go to the countryside, face them three-toothed rednecks, and patiently explain. Go to the city, find the cafe with latte drinking liberals who think Marxism is too far, and patiently explain. Find anybody and patiently explain. All right. So Imanifesto says, enjoying the reading. It's the effort that counts. I appreciate that, Imanifesto. This is your first time showing up in the live stream. And the reason I go so hard with reading the books and creating these audiobooks and sharing is because I know how hard it is for the modern man to find time to read. A lot of us are very busy with work, with school, with our wives, with our girlfriends, with our kids, with working out, with all types of stuff, and men don't find time to read, especially black men. With us being at this particular point in history and our position in the socioeconomic ladder throughout the world, the poorest people don't have time to read. And I count myself as a part of the global poor. I'm trying to do this for people like Imani Manifesto and several other men out there who don't have time to read, but want to engage with text, want to learn, want to grow, and also, continue to stay radical and develop their minds in between, doing all the other things you have to do during the day. And I know a lot of people don't comment on my channel. My channel gets zero views sometimes, and nobody gives a fuck about what I have to say. But there are channels that I watch that nobody else watches. There's content that I watch that has 4 views. There's YouTubers I've been following for years that are still stuck at 3,000 subs, and I love their shit. You know what I'm saying? So I know there's somebody out there who's probably the biggest fan that I've never heard of. Biggest fan I've never heard of. And I'm not trying to say, Imani, you a fan. I'm not coming at you like that. But I'm just saying there's a reason why I'm doing this. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, Kirkham Down Silent says, I always have to repeat the out-of-pocket ones. My bad. Yeah, man, I be going crazy sometimes. And yeah. Kirkham Down says, for every 2 trolls, there's 3 real ones out there. Absolutely, right? We also have to remember a lot of the right-wingers online are not real. The dead internet theory is very, very real. A lot of internet traffic is bots. So there are, we're going up against capitalists. We're going up against major forces in the world. They have billions of dollars to spend on counter-revolutionary activities. So it's nothing for, dark money out there to spend a few million to get a bot farm in Cambodia to just spam leftist content with reactionary comments. So that's not, surprising. I'm going to continue here. The Bureau of the Executive Committee immediately presented the Bolsheviks with a demand to call off the demonstration. On what grounds? Only the state power, obviously, could formally forbid a demonstration, but the state power did not dare think of it. How could the Soviet, itself a private organization, led by a bloc composed of 2 political parties, prevent a third party from demonstrating? The Bolshevik Central Committee refused to accede to the demand, but decided to emphasize more sharply the peaceful character of the demonstration. On the 9th of June, a Bolshevik proclamation was pasted up in the workers' districts. We are free citizens. We have the right to protest, and we ought to use this right before it's too late. The right to a peaceful demonstration is ours. Very, very powerful. And once again, this goes back to something I've said before. Doing crime is sometimes fine. Doing crime is sometimes fine. I know y'all think I'm crazy, but doing crime is sometimes fine. They tried to make it illegal for the people to protest in Russia. They tried to make it so that the Bolsheviks and the workers and the people that have been risking their lives to make a better society in Russia, they tried to make it illegal for them to protest. And they said, no, the right to protest, the right to assemble, the right to make our voices heard is ours. So doing crime is sometimes fine. Continuing here, the compromisers carried the question before the Congress. It was at that moment that Trotsky pronounced his words about the fatal outcome and that it would be necessary for the Congress to sit all night. A member of the Presidium, Gegech Kori, also one of the sons of the Gironde, concluded his speech with a rude cry in the direction of the Bolsheviks. Take your dirty hands off a glorious cause. They did not give the Bolsheviks time, though. It was demanded to take up the question in a meeting of their faction. The Congress passed a resolution forbidding all demonstrations for 3 days. Besides being an act of violence with relation to the Bolsheviks, this was an act of usurpation with relation to the government. The Soviets continued to steal the power from under their own pillow. Milikov was speaking at this time at a Cossack conference and called the Bolsheviks the chief enemies of the Russian Revolution. Its chief friend, he allowed them to infer, was Milikov himself, who just before February had agreed to accept defeat from the Germans rather than revolution from the Russian people. To a question from the Cossacks as to the attitude toward Leninists, Milikov answered, "It's time to make an end of these people." The leader of the bourgeoisie was in too great a hurry. However, he really could not afford to waste time. Absolutely insane how the bourgeoisie will sell out their own people. They would sell out their own people rather than give the people what they want. Food, clothing, housing, shelter, safety, etc. Absolutely insane. So Kirkham Down Stalin says, a lot of governments are just criminal governments, fact, such as the American one. But I want to ask y'all, when do we, as revolutionaries, because I'm going to be reading from the Black Liberation Army soon. I found the Black Liberation Army's text. And if you don't know about the Black Liberation Army, they were the group who were the paramilitary wing of the Black Panthers. I know some people like to think the Black Panthers were, the gun-toting radicals that were going to start the revolution, but they were literally just all about the survival programs. Free breakfast, free education, trying to get housing for the people, patrolling the police, et cetera, et cetera. The Black Panther Party was a political party, you know what I'm saying? But the Black Liberation Army was the armed wing of that part of the struggle, which a lot of people do not know. So I found the Black Liberation Army's only book of collected writings, the collected writings of the Black Liberation Army Volume 1, and that is definitely a read that we will do on Book React. But I want to ask you, because the Black Liberation Army started robbing banks. They broke Asada out of jail. They probably did shoot some police and kill some police. Let's keep it absolutely real. And I'm not condoning violence at all, but I'm asking the people, when do we start considering some criminal acts as revolutionary? And that might sound like a Fed question. Y'all don't have to answer, or y'all can be, sly on how you want to answer. That might sound like I'm, Fed baiting, you know what I'm saying? But at what point, I guess, do we start considering that? I guess there's several parts of revolutionary struggle that we have to consider. The time, the place, the setting, the status of the existing hegemon, you know what I'm saying? When do we start considering crimes like robbing banks or breaking people out of jail or, destroying institutions like military bases while, limiting casualties to as close to zero as possible, if not totally zero? How do we start realizing, like, now is the time? You get what I'm saying? That sort of activity is allowed. You know what I mean? It's just a question. It's just a question. It's something I'm thinking about as I continue to become more radical with the text that I'm reading. But I will continue here. Meanwhile, meetings were being held in factories and regiments, adopting resolutions to go over into the streets the next day with the slogan, "All power to the Soviets." Under the noise of the Soviet and the Cossack Congresses, the fact passed unnoticed that 37 Bolsheviks were elected to the Duma of the Vyborg district. Only 22 from the Social Revolutionary Menshevik bloc and 4 cadets. Confronted with the categorical resolution of the Congress, and moreover with the mysterious reference to a threatening blow from the right, the Bolsheviks decided to reconsider the question. They wanted a peaceful demonstration, not an insurrection. And they could not have any motive for converting a forbidden demonstration into a half insurrection. On its side, the Presidium of the Congress decided to take measure. Several hundred delegates were grouped in tens and sent out to the workers' district and the barracks to prevent the demonstration. They were to meet in the morning at the Tauride Palace and compare notes. The executive committee of the peasant deputies joined in this expedition, appointing 70 from its membership. Thus, in however unexpected a manner, the Bolsheviks achieved their goal. The delegates of the Congress found themselves obliged to get acquainted with the workers and soldiers of the capital. If the mountain was not allowed to come to the prophet at least went to the mountain. Damn, Trotsky was such a poetic writer. The meeting proved instructive in the highest degree. In the Izvestia of the Moscow Soviet, a Menshevik correspondent paints the following picture. All night long, without a wink of sleep, a majority of the Congress, more than 500 members, dividing themselves into tens, traveled through the factories and shops and military units of Petrograd, urging everybody to stay away from the demonstration. The Congress had no authority in a good many of the factories and shops, and also in several regiments of the garrison. The members were frequently met in a far from friendly manner, sometimes hostilely. They were met in a hostile way. And quite often, they were sent away with insults. This official Soviet organ does not exaggerate in the least. On the contrary, it gives a very much softened picture of this nocturnal meeting of two different worlds. So basically, the bourgeois government is coming to the Soviet government and trying to stop the Soviet government from organizing this massive demonstration against the policies of this bourgeois government, technically to allow the Soviets to have power over the country. And these workers are coming there to talk to these radical workers, and they're probably getting beat up. They're probably getting beat up. They're probably getting shouted at. But I wouldn't be surprised if some of them were also converted to the other side to come along and get in the car, comrade. A revolution is going down. Anyway, Kirkham Stalin says this, gotta consider the revolutionary infrastructure behind it, the organizational structure, and also to make sure it's possible under current conditions or needs to take another form. Very informed, very safe comment as well, and I like that, Kirkham Stalin. You know, I know sometimes I get out of hand with some of my questions and comments, but that's a very safe way to answer. There's so many things that we have to consider before we start considering crime, revolutionary actions. You know what I'm saying? To be frank, there are probably things that we could do that are crimes that I think most people would get along with. So, for example, in my state of Louisiana, there are no abortion clinics. And if there are any abortion clinics, there's few and far in between, and you can only get an abortion from Monday to Monday afternoon from 1 to 1:15. And that's after you have 3 weeks of counseling and you listen to the baby's heartbeat and you pray to Jesus 55 times. So what could we do as leftists to help women get abortions? We drive women across state lines. We get them mifepristone. You know what I'm saying? We aid and abet women committing the crime of getting an abortion. Not that long ago, it was possible in Louisiana, Texas, Tennessee, Mississippi to get an abortion. But now, why don't we as leftists try to organize ways to protect our sisters, our cousins, our mothers, our wives, etc., should they exercise the right to get an abortion? You get what I'm saying? So those are certain types of crimes that we could do now that we know will rally the people and get them on our side. You get what I'm saying? When it comes to the higher level crimes like robbing banks or you know, blowing up military bases, you know what I'm saying? Shit like that. Shit that I can't wait to, I hope I live long enough to see. Shit like I can't wait to be around for those times. Well, I guess there are many other things we should consider. How much of the working class movement have we rallied? How much have we weakened the hegemony of the state, et cetera, et cetera? Yes, Kirkham Stalin says it's a crime to even protest Israel on campus some places. Yes, for example, like the BDS movement, we actually go out and protest against the genocide in Gaza, despite them saying they're banning these types of protests. You know what I'm saying? There are so many things to consider before we actually, start saying that crime is now revolutionary action. But the bourgeois government is going to continue to make all of our lives a living hell because they're criminalizing every aspect of it. You know what I'm saying? When it comes from trans rights to gay rights to women's rights, it won't be far along until they start coming after cis het men like me. This is the thing. This is why we are allies to communities that we might not even be a part of. Even though I'm not gay, I'm not a woman, I'm not trans, I care about my gay, trans, and female comrades. Because eventually this bourgeois government is going to come for us. Plus, we want the total liberation for all people. All right, continuing here, Kirkham Down Stalin gets a reply from Acti saying that she agrees with Kirkham Down. The crime should have a higher purpose, not like dumb white supremacist terrorist stuff. Yeah, this is another thing. The crime that, we will do as leftists is not going to be like how the right wing does. Yeah, the Mexicans are invading, so I'm going to walk in this Walmart and spray everybody. That's right-wing, fascist, reactionary, stupid shit. Yeah, the Muslims are coming, so I'm about to firebomb a mosque like them. No, we're not going to do shit like that. But yeah, there are some crimes that we can do. There are some crimes that we can do now that will rally the people on our side. And I'm not talking about shit like Luigi Mangione, and I'm not talking about yet, blowing up them fucking military bases and shit like that. But I'm saying there are some crimes that are very, very possible that, we could do. You know what I'm saying? It would be easy to do self-defense related activities like the BPP. Facts. That's true. But I do think I think Huey P. Newton even said it. I think Huey P. Newton said in Revolutionary Suicide, their emphasis on the gun in relation to their actions led to the BPP's downfall. I'd have to go revisit the book, but I do remember Huey P. Newton saying in Revolutionary Suicide, his autobiography that he wrote in the 80s, well after, the Black Panther Party had fell from grace. You know what I'm saying? Like him saying that the Black Panther Party's emphasis on having weapons, shotguns, was one of their mistakes. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, so continuing here. The Petrograd masses, at least, left no doubt among the delegates as to who was able henceforth to summon a demonstration or to call it off. The workers of the Putilov factory agreed to paste up the declaration of the Congress against the demonstration only after they learned from Pravda that it did not contradict the resolution of the Bolsheviks. The 1st Machine Gun Regiment, which played the leading role in the garrison, as did the Putilov factory among the workers, after hearing the speeches of Chetsy and Avkenstiev, representing the 2 executive committees, adopted the following resolution. In agreement with the Central Committee of the Bolsheviks and their military organization, the regiment postpones its action. The brigade of pacifiers arrived at the Tauride Palace after their sleepless night in condition of complete demoralization. They had assumed that the authority of the Congress was inviolable, but had run into a stone wall of distrust and hostility. The masses are thick with Bolsheviks. The attitude to the Mensheviks and Social Revolutionaries is hostile. They trust only Pravda. In some places, they shouted, "We are not your comrades." One after another, the delegates reported how, although they had called off the battle, they were defeated. The masses submitted to the decision of the Bolsheviks, but not without protest and indignation. In certain factories, they adopted resolutions of censures of the Central Committee. The more fiery members of the party in the sections tore up their membership cards. That was a serious warning. The compromisers had motivated their 3-day veto of demonstrations by reference to a monarchist plot, which hoped to avail itself of the action of the Bolsheviks. They mentioned the participation in it of a part of the Cossack Congress and the approach to Petrograd of counter-revolutionary troops. It is not surprising if, after calling off the demonstration, the Bolsheviks demanded an explanation as to this conspiracy. In place of an answer, the leaders of the Congress accused the Bolsheviks themselves of a conspiracy. They found this happy way out of the situation. Very interesting. Once again, Trotsky is pointing out how the people made the Russian Revolution happen. It wasn't just the Bolsheviks. It wasn't just a bunch of communist leaders who thought up this wicked plan to overturn the system. Sometimes the Bolsheviks got in their own way, and the people said, "What the fuck are y'all doing? We want revolution now. Why are y'all holding us back? We want to demonstrate. Why are y'all telling us not to?" Very interesting. Trotsky is keeping it very real. All right. So So going here, Imani Manifesto says, I think a dialogue with you, bro, Diallo might be interesting. I think a dialogue with you and Brother Diallo. Okay, Brother Diallo, I think he's on Black Liberation Media. Yeah, he's cool. He's cool. I wish he did more, just like reading or like video essays, because sometimes he just be rambling. But then again, not everybody's content is for everybody. Not everybody wants to hear a 35-year-old handsome black man in a suit read a book to you, right? And not everybody just wants to hear a probably 40-year-old man just sit in front of the camera and just go for 2 hours. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's the thing. I like Diallo. I just don't consume a lot of his content, though. If he's on a panel, I might listen to him. Well, I definitely will listen to him because he's talking to other people I'm interested in. So, yeah, Kirkham Down Silent says, I was not aware of that. Kirkham Down Silent says, this is now entering into the Trotsky zone on God. Imani Manifesto says, you read my mind about Luigi. Anyway, yeah, we don't want to do adventurism like Luigi. We don't want to do that. Just random assassinations. We don't want to do that. But I want to ask y'all, what do y'all think about Trotsky after reading this? I'm not trying to make anybody a Trotskyist. I couldn't care less. If you're a Trotskyist, a non-Trotskyist, I don't care. It's just long as you're on the left and you're anti-capitalist. That's all that matters. You know what I'm saying? I'm not one of those people that's hung up like Trotskyists are the devil, anarchists are wicked and stupid. Like, I don't give a fuck. You know what I'm saying? But I would like to know, what do y'all think about Trotsky after hearing me read from him for almost the past month or so? And we have about a few more weeks of reading from him. I would like to know, what do you think about this guy? After everything he's been saying, his writing style, his recounts of the revolution, what have you learned from this, if anything, if y'all got anything to share? Anyway. So it must be acknowledged that on the night of June 10th, the compromisers did discover a conspiracy, and one which shook them badly, a conspiracy of the masses with the Bolsheviks against the compromisers. However, the submission of the Bolsheviks to the resolution of the Congress encouraged them and permitted their panic to turn into madness. The Mensheviks and Social Revolutionaries decided to show an iron energy. On the 10th of June, the Menshevik paper wrote, "It is time to brand the Leninists as traitors and betrayers of the revolution." A representative of the executive committee appeared at the Cossack Congress and requested them to support the Soviet against the Bolsheviks. He was answered by the chairman, the ataman of the Urals, Dutov. We Cossacks, we will never go against the Soviet. We Cossacks will never go against the Soviet. Against the Bolsheviks, the reactionaries were ready to go hand in hand, even with the Soviet, in order the better to strangle it later on. On June 11th, there assembles a formidable court of justice. The executive committee, members of the presidium of the Congress, leaders of the factions, in all about 100 men. Cesarelli, as usual, appears in the role of prosecutor. Choking with rage, he demands deadly measures and scornfully waves away Dan, who is always ready to bait the Bolsheviks, but still not quite ready to destroy them. What the Bolsheviks are now doing is not ideological propaganda, but a conspiracy. The Bolsheviks must excuse us. Now we are going to adopt different methods of struggle. We have got to disarm the Bolsheviks. We cannot leave in their hands those two great technical instruments which they have possessed up to now. We cannot leave machine guns and rifles in their hands. We will not tolerate conspiracies. That was a new note. What did it mean exactly to disarm the Bolsheviks? Sukhanov writes on this subject, the Bolsheviks really did not have any special stores of weapons. All the weapons were actually in the hands of soldiers and workers, the immense mass of whom were following the Bolsheviks. Disarming the Bolsheviks could mean only disarming the proletariat. More than that, it meant disarming the troops. In other words, that classic moment of the revolution had arrived when the bourgeois democracy, upon the demand of the reaction, undertakes to disarm the workers who had guaranteed the revolutionary victory. These democratic gentlemen, among whom were well-read people, had invariably given their sympathy to the disarmed, not to the disarmers, so long as it was a question of reading old books. But when this question presented itself in reality, they did not recognize it. The mere fact that Cesarelli, a revolutionist, a man who had spent years at hard labor, a Zimmerwaldist of yesterday, was undertaking to disarm the workers, had some difficulty in making its way into people's hands. The hall was stunned into silence. The provincial delegates, nevertheless, felt that someone was pushing them into an abyss. One of the officers went into hysterics. So Trotsky is saying right here, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is when real revolution is tested. Once again, revolution is in a dialectic. When old forces meet new forces and they come into combat and something new emerges. Let's continue here. We got a lot of comments. All right. Kirkham Down Stalin says, all real ones gotta respect Trotsky, but he low-key can be misleading on some issues. It depends, but everyone has their standpoint. That's very true. Kirkham Down Stalin, absolutely true. But, you know, at this stage in history, I think us leftists, Marxist, communists, we should be allying generally, mostly, with everybody who agrees with us. You know what I'm saying? So, and we shouldn't be throwing out, you know, if we disagree with Trotskyism, I don't think that we should throw out the works of Trotsky, man, because once again, he was a guy who was there, who did it. And I'm sure you agree with all this, but I'm just repeating this for the audience. Trotsky was there during the Russian Revolution, a main figure in it, a highly towering intellectual. And so I think it's a shame that a lot of the leftist, you know, intelligentsia that does exist, or leftist readers who are out there, you know, sort of dismiss Trotsky's work. You know what I'm saying? Just because they heard somebody else say that they heard he was a revisionist. You know what I'm saying? Or just because Max Eastman, the guy who translated Trotsky's work, ended up becoming a neocon Republican. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, going to Iman Manifesto, he says, I used to do book reviews, which were my favorite content of his, or he used to do book reviews, which were my favorite content of his. His channel was around for years before linking with BLM. Check it out, African World Order. To your point about underappreciated, obscure content creators, more like 50-something-year-old ranting incessantly. Yeah, okay, yeah, African World Order. Listen, Diallo pops up on my screen, so does Jared Ball. Of course, FD, you know, he's on all of our feeds as well. There's a great channel that I'm listening to right now. It's the Anti-Imperialist Scholars Association or Network. Anti-Imperialist Scholars Network, I think. And mostly it's all women of color on there talking about, you know, imperialism, the history of socialism, radical thinking, and things like that. And all those women are so damn fine. Every woman on the Anti-Imperialist Scholars Network is a baddie, is a baddie, is a baddie. They are all so damn fine. And what makes them even more fine is that they're so damn intelligent too. You know what I'm saying? And there's baddies of all types and stripes to choose from on that channel. So which one you want to listen to? The Puerto Rican mummies? The Arab baddies? What did Ghostface say? My Puerto Rican... Wait, what did Ghostface say on Ice Cream? Ice Cream, Wu-Tang lyrics. Puerto Rican peeking, how you kicking? Man, pull it up, pull it up. Raekwon, Ice Cream. Oh, man, anyway. Kirkham Down says, you sold me, that's all. Okay, Ghostface on Ice Cream, he says, yo, honey dip, summertime, fine, Jerry dripping. See you on pickings with a bunch of chickens, how you clicking? I kept shooting strong notes as we got close. She rocked rope, honey throat smelling like impulse. Your whole shell, baby's waking like Nimrod. Caught me like a freshwater scrod. I might, or may I not be God. Attitude is very rude, boo. Crabby like seafood. It turns me on like Vine, see a law rule. They call me Starkey Love Hunt. Check the strategy. By any means, Shirley Temple Curls was done by Billie Jeans. Black Mrs. America, your name is Erica, right? True. Lazy eyeball. Small feet, 6 shoe. Hey, I just caught that, man. He was talking to a lazy bitch. Caramel complexion, breath smelling like cinnamon. Excuse me, hun, the dawn meant no harm. Turn around again. Goddamn, backyard's banging like a Benzie. If I was Jiggy, you be spotted like Spud McKenzie. I'm high-powered, put Adina Howard to sleep. Your pardon, that bitch been on my mind all week. But back to you, Maybelline Queen. Let's make a team. You can have anything in this world except cream. So what you want to do? What you want to do? Let's go ahead and walk these dogs and represent Woo. Oh my God, Ghostface is going crazy. That's how I feel. That's how I feel about all the women on the Anti-Imperialist Scholars Network. I dedicate the Ghostface verse to all the beautiful women at the Anti-Imperialist Scholars Network. They are fine. They are fine. Shout out to Ghostface Killer. Shout out to Raekwon. I digress. Let's go back to Trotsky here. No less pale than Tsetserelli, Kamenev rose in his seat and cried out with a dignity, the strength of which was felt by the audience. Mr. Minister, if you are not merely talking into the wind, you have no right to confine yourself to speech. Arrest me and try me for conspiracy against the revolution. The Bolsheviks left the hall with a protest, refusing to participate in this mockery of their own party. The tenseness in the hall became almost unbearable. Lieber hastened to the aid of Tsetserelli. Restrained rage was replaced by hysterical fury. Lieber called for ruthless measures. If you want to win with the masses who follow the Bolsheviks, then break with Bolshevism. But he was heard without sympathy, even with a half hostility. Yes, all right. Iman Manifestos said, do you mean Anti-Imperialist Scholars Network? Absolutely, yes. The Anti-Imperialist Scholars Network, that's who I just embarrassed myself for rapping Ghostface Killer's verse from Raekwon's Ice Cream. Okay, yes, that's what I'm talking about. Subscribe to them. Great channel, small, obscure channel, and great content. A lot of knowledge right there. Anyway. Impressionable as always, Lunacharsky immediately tried to find a common ground with the majority. Although the Bolsheviks had assured him that they had in mind only a peaceful demonstration, nevertheless, his own experience had convinced him that it was a mistake to organize a demonstration. However, we must not sharpen the conflicts without pacifying his enemies. Lunacharsky irritated his friends. We are not fighting with the left tendency, said Dan Jesuitically. He was the most experienced, but also most futile of the leaders of the swamp. We are fighting with the counter-revolution. It is not our fault if behind your shoulders stand the agents of Germany. The reference to Germans was merely a substitute for an argument. Of course, these gentlemen could not point to any agents of Germany. Tsetserelli wanted to deal a blow. Dan merely wanted to show his fist. In its helplessness, the executive committee sided with Dan. The resolution offered to the Congress next day had the character of an exceptional law against Bolsheviks, but without immediate practical inferences. You can have no doubt after the visit of your delegates to the factories and regiments, said a declaration addressed to the Congress in writing by the Bolsheviks, that if the demonstration did not take place, it was not because of your veto, but because our party called it off. The fiction of a military conspiracy was created by the members of the provisional government in order to carry out the disarming of the proletariat of Petrograd and the disbanding of the Petrograd garrison. Even if the state power went over wholly into the hands of the Soviet, which we advocate, and the Soviet tried to put fetters upon our agitation, that would not make us passively submit. We should go to meet imprisonment and other punishments in the name of the idea of international socialism, which separates us from you. Once again, the people are saying, we will demonstrate, we will fight for our rights, whether it's against you or whether it's against the Bolsheviks, whether it's against the old monarchists or whether it's against these guys who are talking about communism and socialism, whatever. We don't care. We will fight for our rights. And once again, this is a powerful lesson. All right. Iman Manifesto says, Dr. CBS has appeared on that channel. I'm not sure who Dr. CBS is exactly, but there's a lot of great scholars on that channel. I listen to them all the time, and subscribe to them. Anyway, the Soviet majority and the Soviet minority confronted each other breast to breast, 3 days as though for a decisive battle, but both sides stepped back at the last moment. The Bolsheviks gave up the demonstration. The compromisers abandoned the idea of disarming the workers. Tsetserelli remained in the minority among his own people. Nevertheless, from his point of view, he was right. The policy of union with the bourgeoisie had arrived at a point where it became necessary to paralyze the masses who were not reconciled to the coalition. To carry the compromise policy through to a successful end, that is, to the establishment of a parliamentary rule of the bourgeoisie, demanded the disarming of the workers and soldiers. But Tsetserelli was not only right, he was besides that powerless. Neither the soldiers nor the workers would have voluntarily given up their arms. It would have been necessary to employ force against them. But Tsetserelli was already without forces. He could procure them, if at all, only from the hands of the reaction. But they, in case of a successful crushing of the Bolsheviks, would have immediately taken up the job of crushing the compromised Soviets, and would not have failed to remind Ceccarelli that he was a former hard labor convict and nothing more. However, the further course of events will show that even the reaction did not have forces enough for this. So what Trotsky is saying here is that it's very important for the workers, for the soldiers to remain armed, right? And this is something I haven't said on this channel before in relation to, communism or Marxism and my recent, political developments over the year. After reading Lenin, right? Lenin talked about the revolution will be protected by the armed workers. Trotsky is saying here that counter-revolutionaries will always try to take the weapons out of the hands of the revolutionaries, disarming the people. As you know, in America, we hold the Second Amendment to be holy, sacrosanct. The right to have an AR-15, pistols, AKs, shotguns, all types of shit, 38 revolvers, snub noses, Dracos, all types of shit. Americans love guns. I'm asking the people here, because I have a very intelligent audience right now, how do we feel about the Second Amendment? Does it actually help in revolutionary cause? I would argue one of the best ways that the liberal dictatorship that we live under right now, the best way that they have been able to placate the masses, suppress the masses, is by turning the masses against each other with our own weapons to destroy ourselves, by having the gun readily available. There's a reason why, every single year, thousands, tens of thousands of Americans die by gun violence. I would argue that's not by accident, that is by structural design. The society wants us to slaughter each other, to stop the next revolution from coming up. At times in Russia, here, they had no right to have guns. That wasn't considered a right. People had guns, you know what I'm saying? Because soldiers were coming back from the front lines with guns. A lot of people who were living in rural areas needed guns to stop the Siberian tigers and Russian bears from eating their kids and shit. But by and large, what we consider to be sacrosanct in America is weird, is considered very weird compared to other parts of the world. For us leftists, should we be advocating for the abolishment of the Second Amendment, which is something I believe in? I believe in America, we do not need to have the right to have a gun. I believe it's counter-revolutionary, and I don't believe it's going to help us actually overthrow this liberal dictatorship that we're living under. All right? Daniel Alvarez says poverty is the greatest cause of violence. Think about it. Absolutely, which is why we want to have socialism, to get rid of poverty, right? And poverty is relative depending on where you live in society. What type of society are we living in? But yes, I'm not denying that poverty causes it. But I would also say poverty is structural in America. Capitalism needs a permanent underclass to maintain itself. It needs a steady supply of workers who will be underemployed or unemployed to make sure that those who are employed are unable to actually bargain for better wages and conditions. So yes, poverty is structural by design, and I would also argue the way that America has its gun system set up, the way guns are proliferated and percolate throughout society, is structural in a way to make sure that the status quo maintains. This might be the most controversial opinion, especially when I talk to my American leftist audience, but I would like to know what you all think. Should we as leftists be advocating for the Second Amendment's abolishment, even though we know we will need weapons to overthrow this racist, imperialist, capitalistic war machine? I don't know. Tell me what you think in the comments. I would like to know what you think. Okay? Yeah. So go into the comments. Kirkham Down Solomon says the Second Amendment should be allowed in America if we are in America. But then afterward, it depends of how counter-revolution can go. I'm not sure. I'm from Texas, though, too. I know you from Texas, baby. This nigga got 2 guns on him right now. Kirkham Down Stalin is listening to my live stream, just polishing up the pistol. Pause, no diddy. You know what I'm saying? He oiling up the M16 right now. He like, I don't know about this one, Simon. Simon, I don't know. I don't know, Simon. I like my guns, boy. I'm just saying, man. I'm not saying if we have a successful socialist revolution that nobody could, let's say, own a gun. I do think if you have a gun like they have in Switzerland, you know, where most people go out on the weekends and shoot them at the range. I would be happy living in a society where you would have the right to own a gun, but it's not kept at your property. You cannot keep it in your car or on your person. You want to shoot your gun, you got to go to the place where people are allowed to shoot guns. And that's where your gun is stored up in a locker somewhere. You know what I'm saying? Iman Manifesto didn't answer the question, so I won't be reading that comment, though he's recommending a book I've heard of before. Acti says, going back to the crime question, if Acti is just Acti's like going back in time to over an hour ago. Going back to the crime question, if there was easy access to guns, okay, no, so it's related to the gun question. If there were easy access to guns, I think there would not be a lot of unnecessary crime which are not useful for the revolution. I'm going to read that again. Acti says, going back to the crime questions, if there easy access to guns, I think there would be a lot of unnecessary crime which are not useful for the revolution. I mean, that's essentially what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. America wants us to slaughter each other and kill each other and be afraid of each other. America wants the working class to be at war, literally. Literally, they want us to point at each other and shoot at each other. The system is very happy whenever a white man walks into a supermarket and slaughters a bunch of kids. The America is very happy when young black men are shooting at each other because one wears a blue rag, one wears a red rag. They want the working class to feel like there cannot be unity because who's got a gun? Who's going to spray us? Oh, it's most likely those people I don't like. It's black people. It's white people. It's Jewish people. It's white supremacists. It's crazy communists. It's everybody. The system wants us to be fighting against each other. And no better way to make people afraid of each other than to have everybody with a gun. You know what I'm saying? Kirkham Down Solid says, we got to get guns restricted for Republicans. I'm not mad at that either. Okay. Okay. Acti says, just read it. Shit is connected. Okay, Acti, you don't have to yell at me, man. Okay, hey, my hands are up, officer. My hands are up, officer. Now, Miss Officer, what you gonna do with that big booty? Okay? All right? Anyway, I would like to continue the Second Amendment question. Just think about it. I would like to know, what do y'all think? Should us as leftists and socialists be advocating for the abolishment of the Second Amendment? Should that be a part of our platform, our policy, something that we tell people that we believe in and we want to see changed in our society? I know that might be the hardest sell for Americans, even if all the facts are on our side. But I would like to know, as leftists, not as any of you crazy right-wingers. I don't care what a right-winger says about this question. I care only about what leftists say. Should we make it open policy, a part of our broad platform, that we want the abolishment of the Second Amendment? Because it only leads to working class people killing each other. It only leads to the working poor killing each other. It only leads to racial and ethnic and sexual and gender minorities murdering each other. You get what I'm saying? Yeah, I'm continuing here. Politically, Setsorelli grounded his argument for fighting the Bolsheviks upon the assertion that they were separating the proletariat from the peasantry. Martov answered him, Setsorelli does not get his guiding ideas from the depths of the peasantry. A group of right cadets, a group of capitalists, a group of landlords, a group of imperialists, the bourgeoisie of the West. These are the ones who are demanding the disarmament of the workers and soldiers. Martov was right. The possessing classes have more than once in history hidden their pretensions behind the backs of a peasantry. From the moment of publication of Lenin's Theses of April 4th, a reference to the danger of isolating the proletariat from the peasants became the principal argument for all those who wanted to drag the revolution backwards. It was no accident that Lenin compared Setsorelli to the old Bolsheviks. In one of his works of the year 1917, Trotsky wrote on this theme, the isolation of our party from the social revolutionaries and Mensheviks, even its extreme isolation, even by way of solitary confinement, would still in no case mean the isolation of the proletariat from the oppressed from the oppressed peasantry and the oppressed city masses. On the contrary, a sharp demarcation of the policy of the revolutionary proletariat from the treacherous apostasy of the present leaders of the Soviet can alone bring a saving political differentiation into the peasant millions, draw away the poor peasants from the traitorous leadership of the aggressive social revolutionary type of Muzhik, and convert the socialist proletariat into genuine leaders of the national plebeian revolution. But Tsetserelli's totally false argument remained alive. On the eve of the October Revolution, it reappeared with redoubled force as the argument of many old Bolsheviks against the uprising. Several years later, when the intellectual reaction against October began, Tsetserelli's formula became the chief theoretical weapon of the school of the epigons. So basically, people were trying to divide the peasantry from the city dwellers and the working class, right? The traditional proletariat, right? And so, yeah, both Trotsky and Lenin are saying that's insufficient. We will not have a sufficient, proper revolution, a successful revolution, if we say this is not for the peasantry. We will not just abandon the rural people, something that we should also keep in mind in America, where there is a big divide between the rural folk and the city dwellers. All right, going on, continuing here, we only have a few more pages. I've been doing a lot of commentary in the comments section, but there's quite a few pages left in chapter 22. All right, so remember, this is the last chapter of volume 1. So this is a monumental episode. I appreciate everybody joining in, but we will be on live for quite a long time finishing up this chapter. You know what I'm saying? And we probably won't read the appendix section for this part, you know what I'm saying? But we will be wrapping up all the way to the conclusion section, because for chapter 22, Trotsky gives notes on different aspects of different chapters in here. And that's for the people that are, really deep into the finer details of this story. But there are quite a few pages left in chapter 22. So if any of y'all have to go, I don't mind. Keep it real. Stay as long as you feel welcome. But go into the comment section. Okay. Daniel Alvarez says, I'm actually for an extension of the Second Amendment for future society. Not a socialist, by the way, a Marxist. Okay, I'm confused. Daniel Alvarez, you're not a socialist. Are you a Marxist? I'm confused by what you're saying, Daniel. Daniel, can you please explain? Because I've yet to meet a socialist who wouldn't consider themselves Marxist, right? And what does Marxist mean outside of being a socialist? Are you a Marxist in an academic sense? Like you just take parts of Marxism to apply it to certain, intellectual fields or something like that? Please explain that, Daniel. Iman Manifesto says, I think restriction on guns in this country is like restricting alcohol. Futile. Well, then again, I guess we'll just be at war then. The working class will just continue to kill each other. I think restricting the second would only affect the most vulnerable communities, to be honest, and the good old boys would keep theirs. Well, yeah, they are pretty criminal. I wouldn't be surprised if the white boys in Tennessee and Louisiana say, the government ain't gonna take my guns. So I get what you're saying there. But once again, I think that's the fear, right? We have it in our mind, like we're gonna be, like they're gonna immediately just start slaughtering black folks. Well, in a way, they're doing that now. Right? In a way, we already have guns, and police pull up and shoot 12-year-olds for playing with toy guns. You know what I'm saying? We already live in a society where police can lean on a man's neck for 9 minutes in public, broad daylight, and murder a man on live stream. You get what I'm saying? We already live in that world where vulnerable communities are targeted by the gun. You know what I'm saying? All right. Imam Manifesto says restrictions on, I guess restrictions, I stepped away on multitasking. Okay. AS says, do you maths debates? AS, we're not talking about math. Kirkham Down Silent says, like a Trotskyist, a lot of Trotskyists call themselves Marxists only or Leninists only. Like a Trotskyist, a lot of Trotskyists call themselves Marxists only or Leninist only. Okay, so are you implying that Daniel Alvarez is just a pure Marxist. He identifies as just a pure-blooded Marxist, I guess, if that's even possible. I guess I would love to know how that would make sense. You know what I'm saying? Because Marx never was in a revolution. He was never in a shooting war. You know what I'm saying? Marx never picked up that gun. You know what I'm saying? He never put in work. He did the groundwork, but he never put in work. You know what I'm saying? So Daniel Alvarez, if you could clarify your ideology and what you mean by that. All right? Anyway, let me blow my nose real quick. All right? Plus also a water break. All right. Kirkham Down says there are modern Trotskyist organizations that kind of talk about this stuff, but I don't know. Okay. Yeah, I guess it's possible to identify as anything. I would be surprised if I met somebody who's like, I'm strictly a Leninist. Fuck Marx. I'd be like, damn, how deep in the rabbit hole did you go? Oh shit. I'm strictly a Leninist. Fuck Marx. Hey, I'm so confused by some of these people's comments, man, and how they think. Anyway, yeah, we have a few more pages to read. Let's put in the work. Let's do it. At the same session of the Congress, which condemned the Bolsheviks in their absence, a representative of the Mensheviks unexpectedly moved to appoint for the following Sunday, the 18th of June, a manifestation of workers and soldiers in Petrograd and other important cities, in order to demonstrate to the enemy the unity and strength of the democracy. The motion was carried, although not without bewilderment. Something over a month later, Milikov fairly well explained this unexpected turn on the part of the compromisers. In delivering cadet speeches at the Congress of the Soviets, in disorganizing the armed demonstration of June 10th, the ministers, socialists, felt that they had gone too far in our direction, that the ground was slipping under their feet. They got frightened and backed away abruptly toward the Bolsheviks. The decision to hold a demonstration on June 18th was, of course, not a step in the direction of the Bolsheviks, but an attempt to turn toward the masses as against the Bolsheviks. Their nocturnal experience with the workers and soldiers had caused a certain amount of trepidation among the heads of the Soviets. Thus, for instance, in direct opposition to what had been in mind at the beginning of the Congress, they hastily produced in the name of the government a resolution calling for the abolition of the State Duma and the summoning of a constituent assembly for the 30th of September. The slogans of the demonstration were chosen with the same idea of not causing any irritation to the masses. Universal peace, immediate convocation of a constituent assembly, democratic republic, not a word either about the offensive or the coalition. Lenin asked in Pravda, and what has become of complete confidence to the provisional government, gentlemen? Why does your tongue stick in your throats? This irony was accurately to the point. The compromisers did not dare demand of the masses confidence in that government of which they themselves were members. All right? So, yeah. Well, Kirkham Down says to distinguish from Marxist Leninists, that would be crazy. Yeah, if somebody said, I'm a Leninist, strictly. No, not a Marxist Leninist. Don't get me confused with those crazy motherfuckers. Anyway, the Soviet delegates, having a second time made the rounds of the workers' districts and the barracks, gave wholly encouraging reports on the eve of the demonstration to the executive committee. Setzarelli, to whom these communications restored his equilibrium and inclination toward complacent sermonizing, addressed some remarks to the Bolsheviks. Now we shall have an open and honest review of the revolutionary forces. Now we shall see whom the majority is following, you or us. The Bolsheviks had accepted the challenge even before it was so incautiously formulated. We shall join the demonstration on the 18th, wrote Pravda, in order to struggle for those aims for which we had intended to demonstrate on the 10th. The line of march, evidently in memory of the funeral procession of 3 months before, which had been, at least superficially, a gigantic manifestation of the unity of the democracy, again led to Mars Field and the grave of the February martyrs. But aside from the line of march, nothing whatever was reminiscent of those early days. About 400,000 people paraded, considerably less than at the funeral. Absent from the Soviet demonstration were not only the bourgeoisie with whom the Soviets were in coalition, but also the radical intelligentsia, which had occupied so prominent a place in the former parades of the democracy. Few but the factories and barracks marched. The delegates of the Congress assembled on the field, read and counted the placards. The first Bolshevik slogans were met half laughingly. Tseretelli had so confidently thrown down his challenge the day before. But these same slogans were repeated again and again. Down with the 10-minister capitalists. Down with the offensive. All power to the Soviets. The ironical smiles froze and then gradually disappeared. Bolshevik banners floated everywhere. The delegates stopped counting the uncomfortable totals. The triumph of the Bolsheviks was too obvious. Here and there, writes Sukhanov, the chain of Bolshevik banners and columns will be broken by specifically social revolutionary or official Soviet slogans. But these were drowned in the mass. Soviet officialdom was recounting the next day. How fiercely here and there the crowd tore up banners bearing the slogan, confidence to the provisional government. There is obvious exaggeration in this. Only 3 small groups carried placards in honor of the provisional government. The circle of Plekhanov, a Cossack detachment, and a handful of Jewish intellectuals who belonged to the Bund. This threefold combination, which gave the impression, with its variegated membership, of a political curio, seemed to have set itself the task of publicly exhibiting the impotence of the regime. Under the hostile cries of the crowd, the Plekhanovites and the Bund lowered their placards. The Cossacks were stubborn, and their banners were literally torn from them by the demonstrators and destroyed. The stream which had been flowing quietly along until then, writes Izvestia, turned into a veritable river of the flood. A veritable river at the flood, just at the point of overflowing its banks. That was the Viborg section, under the banner of the Bolsheviks. Down with the 10-minister capitalists. One of the factories carried a placard, "The right to life is higher than the rights of private property." This slogan had not been suggested by the party. So even the people were very revolutionary. Once again, imagine the scene. It's a big day in Russia. Everybody's outside. They're here for this major demonstration. Some counter-revolutionaries are there. They see these people start popping up with these red banners that say, "All power to the Soviets," "Down with the offensive," meaning stop the war, "All power to the people," "Down with the minister of bourgeois intellectuals that are running the government and just want to bring back the bourgeoisie." And so the counter-revolutionaries are looking at it and they start laughing. They say, "Ha ha, look at these crazy communists." But then more flags start popping up. More flags start popping up. And then they start realizing, oh shit, it's really going down. And then there are some people here waving flags for the old regime and stuff like that. But then they get jumped on. People start jumping on them and tearing down their flags. Absolutely gangster. Incredible. Continuing. Dismayed provincials were looking everywhere for their leaders. The latter lowered their eyes or simply went into hiding. The Bolsheviks went after the provincials. Does this look like a gang of conspirators? The delegates agreed that it did not. In Petrograd, you are the power. They concealed in a totally different tone from that in which they had spoken at the official sessions, but not in the provinces, not at the front. Petrograd cannot go against the whole country. That's all right, answered the Bolsheviks. Your turn will soon come. The same slogans will be raised. During this demonstration, wrote the old Plekhanov, I stood on Mars Field beside Trotsky. I saw on his face that he was not deceiving himself in the least about the significance of the astonishing number of placards demanding the overthrow of the capitalist ministers. It was emphasized as though intentionally by the veritably imperious commands with which some of the Leninists addressed him as they passed by like people celebrating a holiday. The Bolsheviks certainly had ground for a holiday feeling. Judging by the placards and slogans of the demonstrators, wrote Gorky's paper, the Sunday demonstration revealed the complete triumph of Bolshevism among the Petersburg proletariat. It was a great victory, and moreover, it was won on the arena and with the weapons chosen by the enemy. While sanctioning the offensive, recognizing the coalition, and condemning the Bolsheviks, the Congress of Soviets had called the masses on its own initiative into the streets. They came with the announcement, we don't want either offensive or coalition. We are for Bolshevism. Such was the political meaning of the demonstration. No wonder the papers of the Mensheviks, who had initiated the demonstration, asked themselves mournfully the next day, who suggested that unhappy idea? Of course, not all the workers and soldiers in the capital took part in the demonstration, and not all the demonstrators were Bolsheviks. But by this time, not one of them wanted a coalition. Those workers who still remained hostile to Bolshevism did not know what to oppose to it. Their hostility was thus converted into a watchful neutrality. Under the Bolshevik slogans marched no small number of Mensheviks and Social Revolutionaries who had not yet broken with their party, but had already lost faith in its slogans. I want to ask the people here, because demonstration now is becoming a dirty word amongst liberals and leftists. What's the point of marching? What's the point of demonstrating, et cetera, et cetera? I would like to ask all of you, what do you think of demonstrating? Like the traditional marching down the street, holding placards, raising our voices, marching down to the police station. What do you think about all that? Do you think it's useful? Do you think it's a revolutionary strategy? Should it always be implemented? You know what I'm saying? Can we still have radical activity without demonstrations? What do you think? The demonstration of June 18th made an enormous impression on its own participants. The masses saw that the Bolsheviks had become a power, and the facilitating were drawn to them. In Moscow, Kiev, Kharkov, Ekaterinoslav, and many other provincial towns, the demonstrations revealed an immense growth of the influence of the Bolsheviks. Everywhere, the same slogans were advanced, and they struck at the very heart of the February regime. It was impossible not to draw conclusions. It seemed as though the compromisers had nowhere to go, but the offensive helped to them at the very last moment. On the 19th of June, there was a patriotic demonstration on the Nevsky under the leadership of cadets and with a portrait of Kerensky. In the words of Milikov, it was so different from what happened on the same street the day before that there mingled with the feeling of triumph an involuntary feeling of uneasiness, legitimate feeling. But the compromisers gave a sigh of relief. Their thoughts immediately soared above both demonstrations in the form of a democratic synthesis. Those people were fated to drain the cup of illusion and humiliation to the dregs. In the April days, two simultaneous demonstrations, one revolutionary and the other patriotic, had gone to meet each other, and their clash resulted in casualties. The hostile demonstrations of the 18th and 19th of June followed one after the other. There was no direct clash then, but a clash was not to be avoided. It had only been postponed for 2 weeks. The anarchists, not knowing how else to show their independence, availed themselves of the demonstration of June 18th for an attack on the Viborg prisons. The prisoners, a majority of them criminal, were liberated without a fight and without casualties, and not from one prison, but from several simultaneously. It seems obvious that the attack had not caught the administration unawares, that the administration had gladly gone halfway to meet actual and pretended anarchists. That whole enigmatical episode had nothing whatever to do with the demonstration, but the patriotic press linked them together. The Bolsheviks proposed to the Congress of Soviets a strict investigation of the manner in which 460 criminals had been let loose from various prisons. However, the compromisers could not permit themselves this luxury. They were afraid they would run into men higher up in the administration and their own allies in a political bloc. Moreover, they had no desire to defend their own demonstration against malicious slanders. The Minister of Justice, Perevezev, who had disgraced himself a few days before in connection with the summer house of Dernovo, decided to have vengeance, and under the pretext of a search for escaped convicts, made a new raid on the place. The anarchists resisted. One of them was killed, and the house wrecked. The workers at the Viborg side, considering the house their own, sounded the alarm. Several factories quit work. The alarm spread to other sections and even to the barracks. The last days of June passed in a continual commotion. A machine gun regiment prepares for an immediate attack on the provisional government. Workers from these striking factories make the rounds of the regiments, calling them into the streets. Bearded peasants in soldiers' coats, many of them gray-haired, pass in processions of protest along the pavements. These middle-aged peasants are demanding that they be discharged for work in the fields. The Bolsheviks are carrying on an agitation against going into the streets. The demonstration of the 18th has said all that can be said. In order to produce a change, demonstrating, Trotsky says, is not enough. And yet the hour of revolution has not yet struck. On the 2nd of June, the Bolshevik presses, on the 2nd of June, on the 22nd of June, the Bolshevik press appeals to the garrison. Do not trust any summons to action in the street, delivered in the name of the military organization. Delegates are arriving from the front with complaints of violence and punishments. Threats to reorganize the unsubmissive regiments pour oil on the fire. In many regiments, the soldiers are sleeping with weapons in their hands, says a declaration of the Bolsheviks to the executive committee. Patriotic demonstrations, often armed, lead to street fights. These are small discharges of the accumulated electricity. Neither side directly intends to attack. The reaction is too weak. The revolution is not yet fully confident of its power. But the streets of the town seem paved with explosive material. A battle hovers in the air. The Bolshevik press explains and restrains. The patriotic press gives way its fright with an unbridled baiting of Bolsheviks. On the 25th, Lenin writes, "This universal wild cry of spite and rage against the Bolsheviks is the common complaint of cadets, social revolutionaries, and Mensheviks against their own flabbiness. They are in a majority. They are the government. They are all together in a block, and they see that nothing comes of it. What can they do but rage against the Bolsheviks?" Okay, very, very interesting. That's pretty much the end of chapter 22, though we do have the conclusion section to read. Go into the comment section. Hall 9000 says, "This man intrigues me. He dresses so beautifully, but I don't understand why he reads this. I'm reading this to advocate for a better society so that people like you and me are able to share in the wealth that we create when we go to work. The wealth that comes out of our own bodies, our own minds, the edge of our fingertips, from our legs and everything comes from us. The wealth is derived from the people, but yet and still we go to work every day, usually to make somebody else rich, somebody else more wealthy, somebody else to have their dreams." A man went to his boss, and his boss said, "Hey, John, you come into work every day. You're on time. You work hard, and you should work harder, because if you work a bit harder, I can see in your future, I'll be able to buy myself another car." Yes. That's what capitalism does. We need to abolish capitalism. My ancestors were on an auction block. So yeah, capitalism has to go. Capitalism has to go. Racism has to go. Sexism has to go. Homophobia has to go. All the isms have to go. And the root cause of all of it is capitalism in this mutated, distorted form of the way we live in our day-to-day. Capitalism has to go. Okay? Will we have barbarism? Will we continue to eat each other, kill each other, slaughter each other? Or will we have socialism? Will we? These are eternal questions, but we know the right answer. Anyway, I'm going to read the conclusion section of chapter 22 from Trotsky's The History of the Russian Revolution. This is the final section of the first volume. We finished the first volume. It's a monumental day, monumental task. Clapping it up for myself, even though we shouldn't pat ourselves on the back before we cross the finish line. But here we go. So, Trotsky says, "In the first pages of this work, we tried to show how deeply the October Revolution was rooted in the social relations of Russia. Our analysis, far from having been accommodated ex post facto to the achieved events, was on the contrary made by us long before the revolution, indeed before its prologue of 1905. In the further pages, we have tried to see how the social forces of Russia revealed themselves in the events of the revolution. We recorded the activity of the political parties and their interrelations with the classes. The sympathies and antipathies of the author may be set aside. A historic exposition has a right to demand that its objectivity be recognized if, resting upon accurately established facts, it reproduces their interconnection on the basis of the real development of social relations. The intercausal order of the process thus coming to life becomes itself the best proof of the objectivity of the exposition. The events of the February Revolution, passing before the reader, have confirmed our theoretical prognosis, for the time being by one half at least, through a method of successive elimination. Before the proletariat came to power, all the other variants of the political development were subjected to the test of life and thrown aside as worthless. The government of the liberal bourgeoisie with Kerensky as a democratic hostage proved a total failure. The April days were the first candid warning addressed by the October to the February Revolution. The bourgeois provisional government was replaced after this by a coalition whose fruitlessness was revealed on every day of its existence. In the June demonstration summoned by the Executive Committee on its own initiative, although perhaps not quite voluntarily, the February Revolution tried to measure strength with the October and suffered a cruel defeat. The defeat was the more fatal in that it occurred in the Petrograd arena and at the hands of those same workers and soldiers who had achieved the February Revolution and turned it over to the rest of the country. The June demonstration proved that the workers and soldiers of Petrograd were on their way to a new revolution whose aims were inscribed on their banners. Unmistakable signs testified that all the rest of the country, although with an inevitable delay, would catch up with Petrograd. Thus, by the end of its 4th month, the February Revolution had already exhausted itself politically. The compromisers had lost the confidence of the soldiers and workers. A conflict between the leading Soviet parties and the Soviet masses now became inevitable. After the manifestation of June 18th, which was a peaceful test of the correlation of forces of the two revolutions, the contradiction between them must inevitably take an open and violent form. Thus arose the July days. 2 weeks after the demonstration, which had been organized from above, the same workers and soldiers went out into the street on their own initiative and demanded of the Central Executive Committee that it seize the power. The compromise flatly refused. The July days led to street encounters and casualties and ended with the dispersion of the Bolsheviks, who were declared responsible for the bankruptcy of the February regime. That resolution, which Tsereteli had introduced on July 11th, and which was then voted down to declare the Bolsheviks beyond the law and disarm them, was carried out in full at the beginning of July. The Bolshevik papers were shut down. The Bolshevik military units were dissolved. The workers were disarmed. The leaders of the party were declared hirelings of the German staff. One of them went into hiding. The others were locked up in jail. But just this victory of the compromisers over the Bolsheviks completely revealed the impotence of the democracy. Against the workers and soldiers, the Democrats were compelled to employ notoriously counter-revolutionary units, hostile not only to the Bolsheviks but also to the Soviet. The Executive Committee already had no troops of its own. The liberals drew from this the correct conclusion, which Milikov formulated in the form of an alternative, Kornilov or Lenin. The revolution actually left no more room for the empire of the golden mean. The counter-revolution was saying to itself, now or never. The Supreme Commander-in-Chief, Kornilov, raised a rebellion against the revolution under the guise of a campaign against the Bolsheviks, just as all forms of legal opposition before the revolution had adopted the camouflage of patriotism. That is, the necessities of the struggle against the Germans. So now all forms of legal counter-revolution adopted as camouflage the necessities of the struggle against the Bolsheviks. Kornilov had the support of the possessing classes in the party, the cadets. This did not hinder, but rather promoted the result that the troops deployed against Petrograd by Kornilov were defeated without a fight, capitulated without an encounter, went up in vapor like a drop falling on a hot stove lid. Thus, the attempt at a revolution from the right was made, and moreover by a man standing at the head of the army. The correlation of forces between the possessing classes and the people was tested in action. In the choice between Kornilov and Lenin, Kornilov fell like a rotten fruit, although Lenin was still at that time compelled to remain in deep hiding. What variant after that still remained unused, untried, untested? The variant of Bolshevism. Actually, after the Kornilov attempt and its inglorious collapse, the masses stormily and decisively swung over to the Bolsheviks. The October Revolution advanced with a physical necessity. In distinction from the February Revolution, which has been called bloodless, although it cost Petrograd a considerable number of victims, the October Revolution was actually achieved in the capital without bloodshed. Have we not the right to ask, what further demonstration could be given of the deep natural inevitability of the October Revolution? Is it not clear that this revolution can seem the fruit of adventurism and demagogy only to those whom it damaged at the most sensitive point, the pocketbook? The bloody struggle breaks out only after the conquest of power by the Bolshevik Soviets, when the overthrown classes, with material support from the governments of the Entente, make desperate efforts to get back what they have lost. Then come the years of civil war. The Red Army is created. The hungry country is put under the regime of military communism and converted into a Spartan war camp. The October Revolution, step by step, lays down its road, beats back all enemies, passes over the solution of its industrial problems, heals the heaviest wounds of the imperialist and civil war, and achieves gigantic successes in the sphere of the development of industry. There arise before it, however, new difficulties flowing from its isolated position with mighty capitalistic land surrounding it. That belatedness of development which had brought the Russian proletariat to power has imposed upon that power tasks which in their essence cannot be fully achieved within the framework of an isolated state. The fate of that state is thus wholly bound up with the further course of world history. So this is the final paragraph of the final chapter of Volume 1. We're wrapping it up right here. Final paragraph, very short, 2 sentences. The first volume, dedicated to the February Revolution, shows how and why that revolution was bound to come to nothing. The second and third volumes will show how the October Revolution triumphed. And that's the end of Volume 1 of an incredible, incredible book that I can't believe that we actually got this far. This has been a gargantuan, Herculean task. Yeah, there's a lot that we learned here. There's a lot that we were challenged by. There's a lot that we feel more right by after reading this. You know, my belief that a socialist society is the better society and socialist politics are the best politics to have been reified by this book. You know what I'm saying? And I can't wait to jump into Volume 2. Volume 2, we're going to start tomorrow. I have work tomorrow morning, so I got to go to sleep. It's been a pleasure hanging out with everybody here, and I'm glad to be back on live with the people. You know what I'm saying? So shout out to everybody who joined the live stream. I don't see the horizontal poll, so I don't know if anybody voted for that, but let's see what the votes are in the vertical poll, and I'm going to give shout outs after I close the poll. Okay. Okay, if I can get it open. Hold on, it's taking some time. But shout out to everybody that joined the live stream. Hopefully you enjoyed it. It's been fun, and I'm glad to see that the people were active and engaged with our reading today. I'm very happy to see that. But yeah, let's go here. So, with 16 votes in total, I cannot see the results. I closed the poll, but now I can't see the results. It just all disappeared. That sucks. I can't see, but I think Marxist text was the winner. I think more Marxist text was the winner, and I'm happy to see that. I don't know what the other poll results were because I clicked end poll and it just all disappeared. So I don't know what it says. But let me give a shout out to everybody that joined the live stream. Shout out to Hall 9000. Shout out to our commissar and our top comrade, Kirkham Down Stalin. Shout out to AS787. Shout out to Iman Manifesto. Shout out to Daniel Alvarez. Shout out to Acti. Shout out to, yeah, that's pretty much it. It was a live stream with just pretty much y'all. Shout out to Nelson Moreno as well. Shout out to Stewart 2004. Shout out to everybody. Shout out to Lord of Flies as well, who joined the live stream. And yeah, y'all be easy out there. All power to the people. Great live stream, great commentary. All of y'all have been great. All power to the people, and peace.